In a previous video, we were talking about the potential use of narrative roles in RPGs for niche protection in games. We were saying that in combat-oriented games, character classes are often designed so each character has a different power and role in combat. But now we're adapting this idea to narrative roles, which has been adopted from the low-stakes RPG for the cultist comedy role-playing game. With narrative roles, the most important thing about your character is the role they play in the story. That role should define what their characters are good or bad at. Now I want to extend the idea of narrative roles by introducing the notion of character change into it. During the Morning Grind live streams, I think we pushed RPG design forward in this area and came up with a rather interesting idea that I want to flesh out in this video. It even connects to how the Marvel movie franchise deals with character relationships in the pre-Endgame era. So let's dive in, but first let's talk about the dice giveaway. I'm giving away $500 of Cthulhu Horror Elder Dice. These premium polyhedral dice have different Lovecraftian symbols as the highest value on each die, and they're packaged in magnetic spellbook boxes. Sign up at the link below to be part of the drawing and also to know when the campaign for the Cultist RPG is going live. The game is based on The Cultists, a comedy web series about modern-day Lovecraftian cultists just trying to worship Cthulhu and other gods in a world full of people who don't understand. The entire first season is on the Cultist YouTube channel, and now the RPG brings the comedy mockumentary antics of the cultists to the gaming table. You can download a preview of the rules when you sign up for the drawing. We'll draw for the Elder Dice on the Morning Grind live stream the morning the Cultist RPG crowdfunding campaign goes live. Click the link below to enter. When I originally had the idea to design an RPG for the Cultists, it was very much intended to be a one-shot style game, which is in keeping with the original idea of the Cultists as a series of one-off comedy sketches. The remnants of that original idea can still be seen in some of the earliest episodes of Season 1. This meant there was no need to design rules in the game for leveling up or character improvement. The idea that characters should change from session to session, or at least could change, came later. But I didn't think this idea of character change could mean just a monotonic increase of character powers that give you greater attack powers and cooler skills as you increase from level 1 to level 20. That's just not right for things like stories from the cultists anyway. Character change is interesting, and it could mean that they become more powerful, but it could also mean they change in some other significant and meaningful way. Games like Fate have this, when your character must take horrific consequences in order to escape what would otherwise be a certain death. While we were connecting narrative roles to the different characters in the Cultists, I noticed different roles could sometimes apply to the same character. For instance, you could completely build out Acantha as the Metachronism or as the Caretaker. Likewise, Rob could be the Grouch or the Judge. But they didn't necessarily play those different roles within the same episode. And moreover, I noticed the changes of narrative roles could represent story-driven or story-motivated change that happened throughout the season. This tied very much into a conversation that I had with my friend Lou Anders, the author of the Thrones and Bones fantasy series, when he was talking about his theory of narrative roles that he uses to craft stories and that's foundational to his theory of characters. Lou begins with a core character triad of the protagonist, the antagonist, and the relationship character. In this theory, the relationship character isn't necessarily a romantic interest, but rather the character the protagonist has some kind of relationship with that's going to help him understand and overcome the flaws that will ultimately allow him to defeat the antagonist. This is similar to the mentor archetype in the hero's journey. Lou later expands this core group of 3 roles to include a web of others, including the true believer, the doubter, and the bad example, for example, among others. In an important and very fundamental sense, these are narrative roles that Lou is describing. These rules tell you what the character needs to represent whenever he or she is on screen. Lou explains how this theory manifests in the Marvel series of movies, for example, about how a character will learn a lesson in one movie and then teach that lesson to another character in another movie. For instance, Captain America learns about self-sacrifice in his movie and then teaches it to Tony Stark in the Avengers. Tony learns about controlling your inner demons in his second film. He then teaches that to the Hulk in the Avengers. This creates a web of character relationships that extends and develops over several films, with characters rotating through different roles, especially as those roles relate to different characters, in a meaningful way. Lou has been writing out this theory for a potential book, and he's explained a little bit about it on my Table Talk YouTube channel. I hope we're going to be able to have him back to talk much more about that in depth soon. But for now, I was wondering if we could use this idea of shifting narrative roles to address story-motivated character change in the Cultist RPG. So here's the passage that I wrote in the RPG book concerning character change in an overarching RPG campaign. The Cultist RPG is often played as a one-off or one-shot game with players coming together for a single session, selecting characters and then playing out a standalone narrative arc. However, some groups may want to play the same characters over the course of several games. This will allow them to not only more deeply develop their characters, but also weave a longer story, much like the same way multiple episodes of a web series can form a longer arc. The Cultist RPG does not allow for standard character advancement. There are no character levels or skill proficiencies to speak of. It does have a mechanism for character change, though. The same character can be played within different narrative roles. For instance, Rob plays multiple different narrative roles during the Cultist web series, including the Grump, the Critic, and the Fanatic, but typically the focus of any given episode highlights only one at a time. Likewise, Acantha is both the Metachronism and the Caretaker. Ben begins as the Novitiate, but becomes a true believer. To remain true to this aspect of the web series, players are free to keep the same character for a future session, but switch up which narrative role they will play based on the changing situations in the story. They may retain their cult affiliation, unless that's changed too, but they should select new troubles and sway skills from the list of the new narrative role. Switching narrative roles will likely be driven by the events in a previous game session. A skeptical LARPer who experiences a family crisis that causes them to lean further into the cult could become a novitiate, and then be tempted back to the mundane world, becoming the conflicted, and finally have a personal religious experience that causes them to become a fanatic. Humor is often a great way to explore serious topics. The Cultist web series involves themes of belonging, grieving loss, and personal growth. Players who wish to explore such topics may find that embracing character change across play sessions is an important tool. I think this is an excellent way to handle character change, and it fits into the game elegantly without additional rules that would take away from its rules-light nature. But I also want to know if this idea of narrative roles could be used in a more serious way for more serious role-playing games with perhaps more robust rules. I think that's where we should take this idea next, or at least do some exploration. How do you think this idea could be improved? And please do sign up at the link below to get in on the drawing for the Elder Dice and also to know when the Cultist RPG goes live. If you're not already subscribed, please hit the button. I would love to have you here on the channel and on the Morning Grind live streams where we talk about tabletop games and tabletop game design. But for now, go forth, be creative, be constructive, and play some games. Cthulhu Fhtagn.